Nucor Steel Berkeley would like to welcome you to our plant. We are one of the safest steel mills in the world. As one of the contractors working on our site, you are now responsible for safety, along with all of our team members and other contractors' employees. Our plant contains equipment and processes that can be hazardous. We expect you to go home safely every day. To that end, we have developed a number of health and safety practices that everyone on our site must follow. These may be more strict than you are used to at other companies, but we have created a successful occupational health and safety management system that meets the requirements for ANSI Z10, OHSAS 18001, and South Carolina OSHA VPP STAR site, which has resulted in significantly reducing the numbers of incidents and injuries on our site. Your company and every company working at our mill has agreed to adhere to all Nucor Steel Berkeley policies and procedures, as well as federal and state regulations. Our expectation is 100% compliance, along with an incident and injury-free workplace. You will practice personal responsibility while working on our site. Beyond these requirements, you and your company must take all reasonable measures and precautions at all times to ensure a safe work environment for everyone on site. This orientation is intended to make you aware of Nucor Steel Berkeley's safety, health, security, and environmental expectations. Components of our contractor safety program that will be reviewed with you consist of the following: Safety and Hazard Observation Program, STAR, required safety equipment and clothing, incident reporting and emergency procedures, general safety and health rules and instructions, and environmental policies. You are responsible for following these procedures to the letter. It is everyone's responsibility to take personal responsibility for themselves, their teammates, and their work area. In addition, your company has been provided access to IS Networld, our contractor safety and environmental website, or both, for information on contractors' safety, health, and environmental rules and policies. Nucor Steel Berkeley's safety policy is designated by the acronym PLAN. People are our most important asset. Laws and regulations shall be followed. Any hazard causing danger will be reported and corrected. Nucor team members will practice personal responsibility for safety. All contractors working on our site are required to strictly adhere to the plan at all times. Nucor Steel Berkeley has implemented a safety observation program called STAR that recognizes and reinforces safe behaviors and corrects unsafe behaviors and conditions. We encourage your participation in this program by observing coworkers, Nucor personnel, other contractors, and your work environment. Please address unsafe behaviors immediately in a positive manner and report any hazard identified to your supervisor for prompt follow-up. You will be provided with the names and phone numbers of a Nucor contact for your project, as well as Nucor Steel Berkeley personnel responsible for fire and emergencies, safety and health, environmental issues, and engineering. Promptly report every injury, illness, near miss, property damage, or spill to your supervisor immediately. If there is a medical, fire, or security emergency, please contact the Safety Department on Radio Channel 16 on all radios, or dial 843-336-6118. State your name, location, and purpose for the call. The plant has an emergency contingency and evacuation plan. This plan includes the emergency evacuation procedures for this site and emergency response information. As a contract employee, you need to know 3 things. Do not leave the site during an emergency unless you are instructed to do so. Personnel accountability during an emergency is extremely important. During times of emergency, report immediately to the designated rally point for your job or area. Rally points and tornado shelters are shown on the back of the contractor's work permit. Stay at the rally point until the all clear is given. Minimum PPE requirements in our mill are hard hat, safety glasses with side shields and a minimum of 1.5 IR protection, steel-toe shoes with metatarsal guards, and a long-sleeved shirt. No rings, dangling earrings, or unsecured long hair are allowed. Additional PPE, including hearing protection, may be required depending on the area you are working in and the scope of the task you are performing. Pay close attention to warning signs at all mill entrances that show what PPE is required for the area you are entering. Do not enter these areas if you are not wearing the proper PPE. If there are any questions regarding proper PPE requirements, please discuss with your Nucor contact. All clothing must be worn in a secure manner to prevent snagging or being caught in machinery. If you are working on site, you are required to fill out a contractor's work permit prior to beginning work. This permit is designed to notify area operations that contractors are working and to identify specific hazards to the contractors in that area. The contractor will get a permit from either the safety office or maintenance and engineering. The contractor must have a work order number before work can begin. The contractor will fill out all appropriate information and take the permit to the person who requested the job to be performed. The Nucor employee will advise the contractor of any safety precautions about the job. Both will complete the remaining safety sections on the permit. The contractor will take the completed form to the area operations supervisor to advise him of work to be done in his area. Please refer to Contractor's Work Order Procedure FM 1129. Falls are the #1 cause for incidental injury and death within our industry. Nucor Steel Berkeley has basic requirements that shall be followed when fall hazards exist. Standard handrails and toe boards are required on all walking or working surfaces 4 feet or greater in height. When a pit or opening is uncovered for access, permanent standard handrails, midrails, and toe boards must be in place. If not practical, substantial barriers or barricades capable of withstanding 200 pounds of lateral force to prevent falls must be in place. Personal fall protection equipment is required when working at unprotected heights of 4 feet or greater and handrailing does not exist, and when using, traveling on, or working from mobile work platforms such as bucket trucks or power-activated boom lifts. Anyone within the basket of a mobile work platform unit must always be tied off. Acceptable fall protection includes a full-body harness and lanyards or self-retracting lifelines. The lanyards must be tied off to a structure capable of supporting 5,000 pounds for each person attached. All fall protection equipment must be inspected by the user prior to use. All horizontal lifelines must be installed by a qualified person and rated. Retractable lanyards are required when working at heights between 4 feet and 18.5 feet. Shock-absorbing lanyards are not permitted when the working height is below 18.5 feet. In summary, there are several ways to protect employees from fall exposures. Each contractor will have to determine the best safety practice for their work to ensure 100% fall protection is implemented for falls greater than 4 feet. All ladders and scaffolds must conform to ANSI state and federal OSHA regulations. Scaffolds must be designed and erected by a competent person. During the erection stage, workers must wear fall protection. All scaffolding must have a tagging system in place. Scaffolding must be inspected by a competent person each day prior to use. Ladders must be inspected prior to use. Never use a damaged ladder. Extension ladders must be secured and extend at least 3 feet above the top landing. If you plan to work on a ladder above 4 feet and cannot maintain 3 points of contact, proper fall protection must be used. Only fiberglass ladders are permitted on site. Metal ladders are strictly prohibited. There are numerous types of mobile equipment operating on our site: locomotives, slag pot carriers, powered industrial trucks, man lifts, and other heavy equipment. All mobile equipment has the potential to have operator blind spots. Assume the operator cannot see you and maintain a safe distance. Always have positive communication, visual or verbal, with the operator before attempting to pass or cross the vehicle's line of travel. Always stop, look, and listen before entering or exiting any building or bay. In order to operate heavy, mobile, or overhead equipment, you must be both trained and certified in the use of the equipment. You may not operate Nucor equipment without prior authorization from Nucor. All operators of reach forklifts, man lifts, and scissors lifts must go through formal training and have a certification card. When operating equipment, please remember the following. Pre-shift inspection checklists must be completed. All mobile equipment must have working backup alarms. Do not operate any piece of mobile equipment if any safety device is not operating properly. Tag this equipment out of service and report the missing or defective safety device to your supervisor immediately. Operating any mobile equipment with any non-operational safety device is grounds for immediate removal from our site. All mobile equipment must stop at all railroad crossings. Follow all road signs and speed limits. The maximum speed limit is 10 miles per hour unless otherwise posted. Wear seat belts at all times. All personal or company vehicles traveling off the paved roads must have a flashing light and flag. The use of cell phones is prohibited while operating any mobile equipment. All mobile equipment operators must obtain permission prior to entering the coil and beam yards. Do not ride on tailgates, the sides of any vehicle, or in the bed of any truck. The use of forklifts as man lifts is strictly forbidden. When operating heavy equipment, a signal person must be in place when moving. There must be sufficient signage and pedestrian walkways for separation in areas where mobile equipment is being utilized. Aerial lift safety must be adhered to at all times when operating an aerial lift. When aerial lifts will be used in the crane bay, discuss the scope of work with your Nucor Berkeley contact, and you must follow the crane interference procedures. All mobile equipment has the right-of-way while on site. Sirens and strobe lights are warning devices designed to alert personnel to some type of activity in the area. Pay attention to them every time, all the time. You must have an OSHA-recognized certification to operate any mobile crane, including carry deck cranes. On June 19, 2008, Nucor entered into a settlement agreement as the result of a fatality at Nucor Steel Marion, Ohio, that states, Respondent will inform outside employers performing service and/or maintenance on an overhead bridge crane at respondent's establishment that such outside employers need to comply with OSHA's lockout-tagout standard for work on an overhead bridge crane. Respondent will instruct its crane operators not to operate the crane when contractors are doing maintenance on the crane. This instruction shall not apply in the event the contractor's employees are engaged in observation during operation in accordance with Section 1910.179J or are troubleshooting the crane, at which time other protective measures shall be used by the contractor. If you are properly locked out on an overhead bridge crane and have been given access by Nucor to board the crane, you must review crane boarding procedures with your Nucor contact prior to boarding the overhead bridge crane. While working at Nucor Steel Berkeley, interaction with overhead and mobile cranes will be likely and occur at a high frequency. This occurrence is recognized as a serious hazard if crane safety is not understood. Please ensure that you are aware of any crane activity taking place in your work area and abide by the following safety rules. A craneway equipment interference permit must be used to notify all affected personnel of equipment being used for non-routine, non-process-related activities when mobile equipment has the potential to interfere with the travel path of the fixed structure of any active crane, overhead, gantry, half gantry, or wall crane. Or, mobile equipment will be used in a location where no alternate path exists to prevent a crane block or load from traveling over the mobile equipment and personnel. Your Nucor contact will cover the requirements of the crane interference permit when reviewing the contractor work permit prior to beginning work. Only trained and authorized personnel are allowed to operate any kind of crane. Contractors must have Nucor training and approval prior to operating any Nucor crane. Crane interference permit procedures must be adhered to at all times. Do not carry crane loads over the head of any person in the area. Do not pass or work under the load of any crane. Do not attempt to rig to any equipment, machinery, device, or other item unless you are a qualified rigger and are authorized to make the lift. Above all, never ride on a crane load. All excavations and trenching work must be coordinated and planned out by the contractors. This planning must consist of consulting with Nucor Steel Berkeley personnel, reviewing utility drawings, and completing an excavation permit. Excavation activities shall not proceed until an environmental impact review is completed and approvals from appropriate regulatory agencies are obtained if required. When working in any excavation or trench, proper shoring or sloping must be done in accordance with OSHA standards to prevent cave-ins or collapse. All shoring or trench boxes must be assessed by a competent person prior to entry. All excavations must be inspected daily by a competent person and monitored regularly for signs of collapse. When there is a potential for a hazardous atmosphere to exist, air monitoring must be performed. Contractors must take the necessary steps needed to prevent water accumulation in all excavations. Excavations and trenches must be properly barricaded with substantial barricades capable of withholding 200 pounds of lateral force. All contractors must set up and maintain safe work areas to keep pedestrians clear of operations and out of danger. Protect open manholes, catch basins, pits, and excavations with substantial barricades to prevent exposure to fall hazards. Replace manhole lids promptly when work is suspended. All electrical work performed by contractors at Nucor Steel Berkeley must be in accordance with the National Electric Code, NEC, NFPA 70E, OSHA, and any other applicable standard. This work can only be performed by qualified electricians. Before beginning any work, always use a testing device to determine if lines or equipment are live. The proper PPE, including dielectric gloves and face shield, must be worn while making these tests. Contractors are responsible for providing the necessary electrically rated protective sleeves, matting, and blankets, along with electrically rated personal protective equipment like dielectric gloves, face shields, and arc blast suits. Contractors should consult with Nucor Steel Berkeley for appropriate de-energization processes and at no time touch any electrical equipment without authorization from their Nucor contact. Consider all wires live until it is positively known that they are dead. Do not touch any exposed or dangling wires. These will need to be reported immediately. Use only safety-approved electrical devices and equipment that is in good working order. All cords must be splice and cut free. Plugs should be undamaged with all prongs intact. Never remove or modify grounds. GFCIs must be used closest to the power source with all temporary electrical cords. GFCIs must be inspected prior to use. Unauthorized personnel are not permitted to enter rooms or vaults containing live electrical lines or equipment, such as supply stations, substations, motor rooms, or any other room containing high-voltage equipment. When work is completed, do not leave any conductors exposed, such as open switch boxes or bare wires. While working on our site, you must be aware of all the potential energy sources and mechanical hazards that are present. Nucor Steel Berkeley has established a lockout-tagout policy to protect you from the unexpected startup of machinery. As a contractor, you are not authorized to shut down, stop, or de-energize any Nucor Steel Berkeley equipment or machinery without proper authorization from Nucor. In almost all instances, a Nucor master will establish a group lockout. Your responsibilities as a contractor participating in a group lockout include, but are not limited to, use of properly identifiable personal locks, understanding the scope of the lockout, ensuring you're locked out on the proper group or satellite lockbox, verifying the lockout checklist, and removing your personal lock when work is complete. Your Nucor contact will review specific lockout procedures and requirements for the job or jobs you're working on. Nucor Steel Berkeley has established procedures that must be followed before entry into any confined space. These procedures must be reviewed prior to any entry. Familiarize yourself with the confined spaces in your work area and do not enter unless you are trained. Confined spaces require a series of steps to be completed and documented before anyone is allowed to enter. These spaces are identified in the plant by signs stating something like danger, confined space, permit required for entry. Do not enter an area so marked unless you are part of a planned entry team. Employees not properly trained in the duties and responsibilities of the attendant, entrant, and entry supervisor shall not participate in any confined space entry activities. The following steps must be taken in order to enter a confined space. Consult with your Nucor Steel Berkeley contact for copy of the confined space hazard assessment for the space you are entering. Obtain and complete the Nucor Steel Berkeley confined space permit. Conduct a pre-entry briefing to discuss all safeguards and hazards. Conduct atmospheric monitoring. Attendants must be posted immediately outside of the space prior to entry and trained accordingly in the duties of the attendant. A Nucor safety representative must sign all confined space permits prior to entry. Contractors are responsible for completing and documenting a pre-demolition survey prior to performing demolition work at Nucor Steel Berkeley. Demolition, renovation, and other abatement activities must not proceed until proper notification is provided to the appropriate regulatory agencies. The types of demolition work, interior versus exterior, must be considered during the planning stages. Means of egress and protection of the public must be established prior to demo work being performed. All utilities must be turned off, isolated, or protected from potential damage. Check with personnel to ensure there is no energy present prior to doing work. Never demo or remove any electric conduit without first checking with the electrical contractor. All openings and voids created during demolition must be barricaded to address fall hazards. Dust and mud control must be considered. All contractor personnel must identify the best place to be positioned to avoid struck by, struck against, and crushing type incidents. This must be considered when walking to, from, and throughout your work area. Always use the man doors when entering mill buildings. Communication and a general understanding of hand signals will allow you to ensure you are in the best position. We can eliminate hazards in our workplace by following a few simple rules. First, make it a habit to slow down and assess your job before you start. Ask yourself the following questions. Is this the safest way to do this? Could this put another employee at risk? Am I placing myself or others in a dangerous position? Stop and think about your job plans and be sure to discuss any safe zones. By always following the rules of Nucor Steel Berkeley, together we can prevent incidents that may cause serious injuries and fatalities. There is no reason for rules to be disregarded. Shortcuts in safety are not acceptable and will not be tolerated at any time by anyone. Please ask questions of the appropriate personnel. Prior to beginning a task, step back, take a few minutes, and think about your next actions. During your work at Nucor Steel Berkeley, it is important that all contractors understand the guidelines for gate access and parking. Your supervisor will notify you of the gate you'll use for plant access and designated parking. You must further have permission to enter any department to perform work. You are not allowed to receive visitors on plant property without special approval from Nucor Steel Berkeley. Do not remove any Nucor Steel Berkeley property from the plant without approval. All vehicles that enter and exit any Nucor Steel Berkeley facility are subject to search. Cell phone usage is strictly prohibited at the Nucor Steel Berkeley location while operating contractor or personal vehicles, mobile equipment, overhead cranes, production equipment, or maintenance equipment. If cell phone usage is necessary, make sure it is done in a safe location. The use of cameras, camera phones, or video equipment is strictly prohibited. Smoking, including e-cigarettes, is restricted to designated locations only. If you smoke, please ask your Nucor contact to show you any designated smoking areas that may exist. Never smoke near any flammable materials or flammable storage areas. Nucor Steel Berkeley does not tolerate harassment of any kind by its employees or its contract employees. Do not harass anyone via words, actions, or even displays of offensive pictures, signs, or graffiti. If you feel uncomfortable, report the situation immediately to your supervisor. Non-compliance with any of the mentioned items may result in immediate dismissal and termination of business relations. Anyone working on Nucor Steel Berkeley property must not be under the influence of or in possession of drugs or alcohol. All contractor personnel are subject to random or probable cause testing as dictated by your company policy. Nucor Steel Berkeley reserves the right to hold plant-wide drug screens at any time. Refusal to participate in a plant-wide drug screen is grounds for immediate removal from our site. Unless you have been authorized by your Nucor Steel Berkeley contact, do not make any connection to operating electrical, gas, oxygen, water, pneumatic, hydraulic, or process lines. Do not turn any of these utility lines on or off. Nucor Steel Berkeley has assured that every worker has the right to know about the hazardous materials that are present in his or her work environment. As part of this requirement, all hazardous materials must be clearly labeled with warning labels. The warning labels indicate the degree of hazard for flammability, reactivity to other materials, and physical health hazard on a scale of 0 to 4, with 0 indicating minimal hazard and 4 representing the highest level of hazard. Also, detailed information about each material must be made available in the form of a Safety Data Sheet, SDS. All employees have the right to view this information upon request. Any substances brought on site by your company must be approved by Nucor Steel Berkeley through the Management of Change process and accompanied by a current SDS for Nucor Steel Berkeley's files. If you are working overhead, you are responsible for barricading the ground floor to protect all other Nucor Steel Berkeley and/or contract personnel. Place signs warning of the danger of falling objects. Post a spotter whenever adequate barricading is not possible or practical. Don't leave tools, equipment, or loose objects when working overhead so that they may fall. Contractor employees shall not go on roofs without an approved roof access permit. Remember, a crane-way equipment interference permit must be used to notify all affected personnel of equipment being used for non-routine, non-process-related activities when mobile equipment has the potential to interfere with the travel path of the fixed structure of any active crane, including overhead, gantry, half gantry, or wall cranes. Or when mobile equipment will be used in a location where no alternate path exists to prevent a crane block or load from traveling over the mobile equipment and personnel. Your Nucor contact will cover the requirements of the crane interference permit when reviewing the contractor work permit prior to beginning work. The job will not be considered complete until all housekeeping items have been addressed. Keep the job site clean and orderly at all times. Stack lumber, pipe, and other materials where they will not interfere with operations or create hazards. Promptly dispose of all trash, oily waste, scrap, and other waste material as directed by Nucor Steel Berkeley. Any contractor found littering or not maintaining housekeeping in their work areas will subject his company to unpaid housekeeping duties for up to 30 days per occurrence. Before beginning work, know where fire extinguishers are in your location, as well as egress routes. It is incumbent upon everyone to call and report all fires immediately to your supervisor. Extinguish all incipient or beginning stage fires immediately. Before fighting the fire, know where the nearest escape exits are located should the fire grow out of control. If you use a fire extinguisher, inform your Nucor contact so the extinguisher can be replaced. At Nucor Steel Berkeley, hot work is defined as any operation that involves open flames or the production of heat and/or sparks. This includes, but is not limited to, welding, cutting, brazing, heating, soldering, air arc gouging, and grinding. Do not perform hot work on site without first securing a hot work permit from your Nucor contact, the contractor coordinator, or Nucor Safety Department. Check your area before burning or welding. Clear flammable materials from the area and provide other employees with protection from the arc's rays. Make sure you are wearing the appropriate personal protective equipment, such as face shield, welding helmet, welding and burning gloves, and fire-retardant clothing. Properly store and transport oxygen and gas cylinders. Keep them away from heat, open flames, and hot metal. Transport and use cylinders in a vertical position only. Store them with caps on and prevent them from falling. All torch hoses and welding leads should be stored when not in use. They should be kept out of traffic lanes during use if possible. Torch hoses and welding leads should not be under areas where work is being performed. Hot metal or other material could damage the hoses, increasing the potential for a fire or other incident. Failure to shield the welding arc can result in immediate removal from our site. It is the policy of Nucor Steel Berkeley to provide a procedure to follow when removing grating, floor plates, or handrails in order to ensure the safety of its team members and the contractors who work on site. This procedure is to ensure the proper removal and installation of grating, floor plates, and handrails in all areas of Nucor Steel Berkeley. This applies to overhead, floor level, and basement areas. Nucor Form FMO 898 must be used to ensure compliance with these procedures. Nucor is committed to protecting our environment and has established an Environmental Management System, or EMS. Nucor's EMS is based on a set of international standards called ISO 14001 and undergoes periodic audits, which include contractors and their activities. All contractors at Nucor are involved in our EMS because their work can have the same impact on the environment as Nucor employees. Your daily activities can impact the environment in a positive or negative manner, and just like safety, environmental protection and awareness is a requirement for all Nucor contractors. The foundation of any EMS is the environmental policy. Nucor Steel Berkeley uses the acronym GATOR for its environmental policy. All contractors should understand their responsibilities under the GATOR policy. Hard hat stickers are available as a reminder of the key principles behind GATOR. The GATOR policy states our firm commitment to the continual improvement of environmental performance. G stands for Good Corporate Citizen. This means that we are committed to the protection of the environment by fulfilling all compliance obligations while promoting positive environmental impacts. A stands for Aspects. All business activities at Nucor Berkeley that impact the environment and community are reviewed to identify opportunities for pollution prevention and improved environmental performance. T stands for Technology. We will continue to investigate new technologies to improve, prevent, or reduce environmental impacts. O stands for objectives. We will continually improve environmental performance through the development, monitoring, and communication of objectives or goals. R stands for responsibility. Protecting the environment is the responsibility of management and all persons working for and on behalf of Nucor. As a contractor, you may work in various areas of the mill. It is your responsibility to understand the aspects and impacts of the area in which you are working prior to beginning work. Aspects are the work activities that cause the environmental impact. Impacts commonly found at Nucor Berkeley include air emissions, land contamination from spills, resource consumption, waste generation, and water quality changes. Common examples of contractor aspects and impacts include air emissions from road dust and welding, which impact the quality of the air we breathe. Spills of materials such as oil contaminate the land. Use of gasoline, diesel, and electricity consume natural resources. Stormwater contamination from spills, leaks, and contact with equipment can cause water quality degradation. A detailed list of Nucor's aspects and impacts is provided in ISNet World, the Contractor Safety and Environmental website. Each year, Nucor establishes objectives and targets for certain environmental activities in an effort to continually improve. The objectives normally include goals such as reducing air emissions from a source, reducing waste generated, improving water quality, and improving energy efficiency. You, as a contractor, may be made aware of any specific objectives that apply to you or the job you are performing. There are several types of waste generated at Nucor Steel Berkeley. Special disposal instructions are provided in ISNet World. If there are any questions on the safe way to dispose of any material, contact the Nucor Environmental Department. Before discarding any aerosol can, you must ensure that they are punctured. Aerosol can puncture stations are located throughout the mill. Each station is equipped with a puncturing device and filter. These stations contain hazardous waste and must be labeled accordingly. In addition, the thumb screw that holds the lid on the puncturing device must be securely tightened at all times, except when in use. All punctured cans should then be placed in designated metal recycling containers. Used paint in buckets, cans, or drums is also considered a hazardous waste. This material must be drained into the draining station located in the Universal Waste Building near the warehouse. The paint container, once empty, must be allowed to dry. Once the paint residue is dry, the container can be thrown away. Oily debris is considered to be any solid material that is contaminated with oil or grease, including rags, gloves, wood, paper, etc. There are several oily debris hoppers located throughout the mill for disposal of these materials, as well as storage places for used oil and empty drums. The oily debris from these hoppers is collected in 3 oily debris roll-off boxes located outside of the hot mill, cold mill, and beam mill. In addition to oily debris, rags or wipes that contain solvent must be collected separately. Solvent wipe collection drums can be found in each of the mill maintenance areas. Containers containing oil, oily debris, or solvent wipes must be stored in secondary containment and never directly on slag. If you cannot find these areas or containers, a waste disposal map is posted in ISNet World, or you can ask your Nucor contact for the nearest location. Universal wastes include light bulbs, batteries, thermostats containing mercury, and computer or electronic equipment. These items would be considered hazardous wastes. However, the EPA has issued special requirements for these materials if they are recycled. Light bulbs that are universal waste include HID bulbs, fluorescent bulbs, and metal halide bulbs. The only exception is broken light bulbs. If a light bulb is broken, it becomes hazardous waste and must be handled in a more controlled manner. It must be placed in a hazardous waste drum with a hazardous waste label. Universal Waste Storage is located in the Universal Waste Storage Building near the warehouse. Universal waste, with the exception of electronic equipment, must be placed inside a closed container, box, or drum, and properly labeled with a universal waste label. Nucor generates several types of hazardous waste in addition to those discussed above, including baghouse dust, material contaminated with spent pickle liquor, SPL, from the pickle lines, and chromate debris from the galvanizing line. If you are going to be working around hazardous waste, more detailed training and information is needed. Please coordinate with Nucor's Environmental Department for area-specific training, including the proper labeling, storage, and disposal instructions. General trash is made up of municipal-type wastes, and these receptacles are not to be used for anything hazardous or oily. Nucor also recycles many materials, including commingles, which are glass, plastic, or aluminum, as well as cardboard and paper. Please become familiar with the location of these trash and recycle containers in the areas in which you work. The steelmaking process produces a material that is classified as hazardous waste. This waste is designated as KO61, commonly referred to as baghouse dust, as the material is captured by the baghouses. Special PPE is mandated for anyone who may come into contact with baghouse dust. This includes Tyvek suits and respiratory protection. Special training is required for anyone that will be working in this area. Nucor and its contractors are responsible for materials that may wash away into stormwater ditches. Good housekeeping is essential to prevent stormwater contamination, including the proper storage of material in buildings or covered areas. Respond to spills immediately. Do not disturb any ditch, dam, gutters, settlement ponds, or wetland without approval from the Environmental Department. Do not dump any materials into the plant's storm or sanitary sewers. Strict governmental regulations have been put into place to prevent spills. Keep material containers closed and properly stored away from doorways and high-traffic areas. If a spill occurs, ensure personal safety and clean it up immediately. Incident reports should be completed for all spills that occur outside. All containers brought on site that are 55 gallons or greater require proper secondary containment. Nucor is also committed to preserving air quality. Open burning of any type is not allowed. Maintain all equipment, including emission control systems. Obey all speed limits to help control road dust. Any equipment brought on site that may emit any type of pollutants must be approved by the Environmental Department through the Management of Change process. No unauthorized personnel are allowed at the port. If access is required for a job, the Environmental or Safety Department must be contacted to obtain a port pass. In addition, personnel may be required to obtain a Transportation Worker Identification Credential, or TWIC. As previously discussed, Nucor Berkeley has a management of change process in place to monitor changes that occur on site, as well as any new chemicals that are brought on site. Any new chemicals for use on site must first be approved by the Safety and Environmental Departments. A chemical use form must be filled out and the SDS attached. These forms can be obtained from the Environmental or Safety Departments. Your supervisor and/or Nucor contact should also be notified. Other changes must also be approved by Nucor's Environmental Department, such as new buildings, purchase of new equipment, construction and demolition activities, and the addition or removal of storage tanks. In summary, all work activities are to be performed in an environmentally responsible manner. Please help ensure that you, your employees, or your coworkers understand their environmental roles and responsibilities. Understand Nucor's Gator policy and be aware of the aspects and impacts of your job and work area, as well as any applicable objectives and targets. Follow all established work instructions and look for ways to reduce your environmental impact. This orientation is intended to make you aware of Nucor Steel Berkeley's safety, health, and environmental expectations. Your company and every company working at our mill has agreed to adhere to all Nucor Steel Berkeley policies and procedures, as well as federal and state regulations. Our expectation is 100% compliance and an injury-free workplace. You are responsible for following these procedures to the letter. It is everyone's responsibility to take personal responsibility for themselves, their teammates, and their work area. Always strive to ensure that no one gets hurt on my shift today.